This is Cyber Smokehouse, and I'm Ernie.
And I'm Graeme.
Join us as we grill the minds, dig into the experience, and serve up the stories of leaders in cybersecurity.
Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm. Well, today's guest is someone we're really excited to have on the show. He's a cybersecurity leader, a GRC specialist, and security and privacy executive. He has built and scaled governance frameworks and risk and compliance programs, including third-party risk management across hundreds of vendors. He leads security, compliance, and privacy efforts across global teams, supporting frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, PCI, and GDPR. He's driven audit readiness, evidence management, and security program development in highly regulated environments, and he brings over 18 years of experience across security, risk, privacy, and compliance, aligning programs with business needs and operations. He is the CISO Expert at Wiz. Zlatko Unger, welcome to the show. Howdy.
Z, let's light the fire and crank up the heat in the smokehouse. So every smokehouse runs on a different fuel. What's driving most of the heat in your world right now? And not the buzzwords, but what's the real operational pain?
The real operational pain is trying to keep up with all of the buzzword bingo that is happening outside of the organization and sifting through what is actual real threat versus a hypothetical versus snake oil or FUD being shown by different vendors. So basically trying to keep up with the changes that are happening, and at the same time making sure that our staff is using the tools that they know how to use, creating new tools that they will use, and doing it in a safe manner that is not prohibitive to the velocity of the business.
That's a good point. All right, so buzzword bingo. Give us what are the top ones?
Well, I would say that everybody is very excited to use AI in every way, shape, or form. However, using AI in every way, shape, or form creates a tremendous amount of risk across the organization, and also the knowledge of how to do it effectively, efficiently is lost on a lot of folks that are non-technical, that are staying away from it. So how do you bring up the knowledge and close that gap? And at the same time, how do you, as an organization, make sure that whatever is being asked by those AI users is actually approved? You understand it. You know what you're getting yourself into by allowing it. And at the same time, where do you put the guardrails and say, hey, this is no longer allowed, or we can't use this. Do not pass go, do not collect 200, whatever the analogy there is. As there's a lot of folks that want to try new and exciting things, and they want to do it in a corporate environment because they saw, a great demo. But in reality, there's a lot of due diligence that needs to happen before we get to take all those shiny things and play with them.
Yeah, I mean, I just laugh. The AI thing gets thrown around everywhere. I mean, a year ago, just get slapped on anything. You're like, is this just normal technology, or is it really AI behind? Open the hood and there's actually AI behind it.
True,
everywhere. Didn't we just see a shoe company become an AI company just a week ago?
And Allbirds, it's amazing how they have lost the oomph that they had going on, since in the Bay Area, everybody, unless you're not cool, you were wearing Allbirds, and all of a sudden they lost the flavor, and that pivot made them a lot of money. And for what it's worth, hopefully they're going to be successful. There's a lot of smart people over there. I'm sure that that decision was not made in a closed room, and I wish them the very best of luck there.
So this space is moving so quickly too, which is kind of one of the biggest challenges, right? It's just, it seems to be every week there's some new feature, some new model being deployed. How do you kind of, from your perspective, how do you kind of keep up to date and I guess you don't want to quash experimentation, and you want to allow some flexibility in the organization, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you're not exposing yourselves.
Excellent question. So a few things. Internally, we have a couple of different groups of folks that are setting their home labs or are kind of using as a group thing on how to use AI tools that we have access to for work, as well as those that we have on our personal machines. So there's a lot of boffins there that are very, very good at dismantling all the chaos and saying, hey, I tested this out, this works really cool. On top of that, there's all the different newsletters that are published, a lot of activity on Twitter. We're not going to call it whatever it's called now, but I try to plug myself as many places as possible, but also filter the content to the voices that I trust instead of just a bunch of randos that are saying like OpenClaw is going to replace every single job ever, to somebody, hey, I tested OpenClaw and it did these things really well. So kind of filtering out through all the noise to the voices you want to have heard. But it's also difficult because there's a lot of voices, and there might be some voices that I am not listening to because they're net new, and there might be preaching some very cool stuff. So it's an ever evolving, evaluating, way of dismantle, like looking at all of that data.
Right. And then when you kind of look at AI and the security, specifically around the security program perspective, I mean, what are the 2 or 3 things that you think are like prime areas for leveraging AI? I mean, most people normally say SOC. The SOC is the first one, but there's others as well. So I'd be interested in your perspective.
Yeah, I would say like walking around the RSA floor a couple of months back, like everything was a SOC AI with a SOC. It was the easiest, the long hanging fruit. However, I would say that there is a lot of legacy vendors that are trying to slap on AI so that way they can ride the buzz train, as well as new entrants that are actually looking at the problem and thinking through how it can be solved by AI. I think ultimately everybody's challenge is going to be once the tokens become too expensive to replicate the cost needed by a human analyst. But we're in the good times where everything is subsidized to some extent. I would say that a lot of the agent space where you have like an intern or an analyst capabilities are given to somebody who's working in whatever insert security acronym space of your vendor is very helpful because it brings things to your attention quicker rather than you having to manually, hit the start button, copy and paste the logs and say, hey, what does this mean? And go through those motions itself. So I think the agent space is very cool in terms of bringing information in front of you, offering suggestions on what you or somebody on your team can do. And, if you feel brave enough and you feel the warm and fuzzies, allow that agent to actually take action on a human's behalf and, hope that it works out for the best. I think we're going to see a lot more capabilities in that agent space across all of the different acronyms that are associated with cybersecurity. However, even, we were talking about AI SOC. I think there's a lot of things that are now looking at on endpoint protection, DLP, and how can we take all those logs and make them actionable in some way, shape, or form without you having to create the necessary logic. So there's a lot of, I would say, legacy, I don't like, it's the wrong word, perhaps older technologies that we have been accustomed to, and they have been stagnant in their capabilities. Now they can be supercharged, but it's up to the vendor to figure out how they can actually supercharge that capability with the use of AI, rather than what I've seen a lot of vendors do is just slap on an AI on a thing and call it a day. And you're like, this is absolutely no value, and it's going to cost me, 20x or 20% more during renewal because I'm going to have to pay for this feature that I don't need. End of rant.
All right, so I'm curious. So you brought up the OpenClaw thing, and I will raise my hand and say guilty of. I at least bought a Mac Mini with the aspirations of loading it on and playing with it. Where do you stand? Have you started playing with these types of things?
Yeah, so I have I got a Raspberry Pi 5 that I was going to use for it, and the more and more I looked into it, I said I really did not see something that I don't already have automated throughout my house. I don't need an assistant. I'm a big boy. I know how to read email and look at my calendar. I think that if you're busy, you have a lot of chaos in your world and you do need some functionality, I think that it goes like OpenClaw can help you save time and effort. However, getting it to a state that you like and giving it the right permissions that you're comfortable with, I think that like the ROI, the time spent on getting the hardware, installing it, configuring it, I'm not sure where that ROI lays. And the fact that the technology is going to be changing so quickly that there are even SaaS companies now that are offering open call-like technology where you connect your calendars and everything else. It makes it even easier because now you don't have to pay for the hardware. You pay a subscription fee. And I would say that ROI is still unknown, and that I'm very hesitant to jump in and go all in and then realize, oh, I wasted, money, time, effort where somebody has figured it out for my particular use case. I know others that are thriving because they have a complicated need, and I think for those individuals, it totally makes sense to jump in whatever works because it's the ROI is achieved much quicker.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think for me, it's like I like to have the project sitting there thinking I'm going to go do it, and I'm a hands-on learner. So I like the idea of just building it, even though I might not really put it to use, just want to load it and understand. But I agree with you. I think, some of the vendors out there are catching up very quickly, and you can do it out of the box without all this customization, and you don't have to deal with keeping up with, security updates and stuff like that. So I'm with you, but it is very exciting and what's going on.
Right. And I think that putting yourself in the situation where you're just tinkering with it, even though that ROI might not be even realized, it's more of a hobby. You get to learn how a thing works. It might be applicable towards something, for your job. And at the end of the day, you can still have conversations and say like, oh, I had my OpenClaw do X and Y. What did you do yours? And you can bond over the use of new exciting technology. I think that we haven't had anything as exciting as these new tools that are not only available to less technical folks, but at the same time that you can use AI to figure out how to make your AI better. So, use Gemini to figure out why your Gemini CLI is not working. We're such a good state where we can learn so much, and hopefully it opens new doors and opportunities for us to be aware of a new side of technology that we have never tinkered with before, be it AI or some legacy tech.
All right, Z. So I got to take us back. So I will plead guilty. So we said we overhype buzzwords, and then I took you down a buzzword path, which is totally my fault. So we should go back. So I think one of the things when we met before we started this call was, you kind of mentioned like the problem with the buzzwords is we're ignoring the foundational pieces. Like guys, we got to focus on, I don't want to say the basics. So we did a podcast. People said, well, if they're all basics, then everybody would solve them. So foundational things, right? So what are like the foundational security aspects that people are just ignoring and that we really should be, again, just focusing on? Like what in your viewpoint, like tease that out for us.
So I think there's a lot of focus from both, like in any modern day SaaS, of how do we utilize AI internally? How do we use it in our product effectively? And how would we bring value to our, to the business itself, as well as our customers? At the same time, there is a certain level of technical debt that is within, any legacy SaaS. The more years you've been around, the more you topple on, and it's always a priority for engineering, but they never get to it. I still see that with talking to some of my peers that is ignored because the focus on AI is so huge that even though that AI could be used to uncouple that, there's so much more focus that it's still not a priority. And it feels like it's just going to be built upon since we're going to have more technical debt because of all the AI slop that gets introduced before somebody figures out that the code provided by AI is not as good as it should be. At the same time, there's a lot of emerging threats that are coming our way. So for our end users, especially those that are not as technical or don't have the ability to look at an email and make an assessment if it's phishing or not, or look at receive a phone call and think that it's Sally from accounting. I think that there's a lot of new threats at the same time that are also distracting us from all the existing threats. So even though somebody might not be using a new threat through AI and existing tactics, that some of the legacy threats are still passing through because folks are just being bombarded with all of the net new things that they're ignoring, the old school methods of being phished or smished or insert your ished on the end user side.
Yeah, so things like vulnerability management, identity management, all those kind of foundational things are important because that's where those threats are going to be exploited, right?
Right. And it's very hard to kind of move at this crazy pace that we're in, ensure that every legacy, and I say legacy loosely, every older problem gets ignored or deprioritized given that there's not enough resources because you're chasing the new threats and new capabilities and new. So it's very hard to kind of have your foot in what's new and exciting and the other foot in your business from 2 years ago that you still have to solve for, and you still have a risk register that you're dealing with, and all the things that are still on there, they're not getting fixed because everybody else is just focusing their attention on something else.
Well, and those are all still problems. They're just being problems that are happening faster and things that need to be addressed faster. Yeah. So configuration management is still an issue. Patch management is still an issue. It's just now they're being recognized and exploited at a much faster pace because of all these things going out.
That's true. And maybe the is for anybody in a head of IT, head of security type of positions to look at how can I utilize my existing vendors to solve this old threat that I have, or is there a net new vendor that is utilizing AI that can help in that space? And I think that there is a lot of new startup companies that are stemming from the legacy vendor world. They're like, but we can do this better with AI because we're doing it ground up. We're not jamming AI on top of our existing infrastructure. Just before it was cloud native, now it's AI native, and how those companies are being spun up and the things they're able to do. It's very fascinating space on the startup and in that startup world.
Cool. Well, we've talked a bit about AI. What other emerging technologies are you kind of focused on, or are you concerned about? Quantum, identity. What else is on the kind of the list, or should be on the list for people?
So I would say that there is a lot of focus on like RBAC and understanding how somebody's identity travels with them around different systems. There's not a standard that every different SaaS offering operates under. Everybody thinks that if you connect your SaaS to your SSO, Bob's your uncle, you have it figured out. But the capabilities of those systems to give you finite permissions, where scoping is a part of it. I think that there's this whole world that we haven't figured out collectively in the access space, since each vendor does it differently. Some of them allow you to code, others, it's a UI element. There is no logs. There is no accountability. If you're an admin, you can go ham. So from what I see, this is an area that is getting more and more complex as we're growing, and folks are given access to all of these cloud sources themselves. I think that's one area. You mentioned quantum compute. I don't think that I really don't think that that's something that we should be panicking and losing our hair on. I don't have much to lose, so who am I to speak?
Hey, we didn't say anything. That was you.
But I don't think that it's a threat that needs to be kind of, you keep your ear out to see if there has been any development. But at the end of the day, if something happens, it's going to affect everybody. And the question is, are attackers going to have quantum compute ready at their fingertips? And the answer is probably not, unless they are able to replicate whatever that quantum compute machinery looks like. But again, then somebody's going to be able to sell quantum ready security at that point, and we're just going to have to fork over however much it costs, and get the checkbox done, and we can move on with other more complex threats out there. The last one I think that stems from this is supply chain, and understanding from a third party perspective of where your data lies, who has access to it, and what are the fourth and fifth parties that might be connected to that data. I don't think that there's a single solution that does a good job of, you might understand from a manufacturing standpoint, if you're making a widget, where those parts of the widget come from. And then at a certain point, you don't know where, that component out of your one of your vendors, where they themselves source the parts for that component. Just like in a typical TPRM mode, You can look at the subprocessor list, you can do the questionnaire, but there's so many gaps that are left open understanding how data moves around, especially with, I know we're not going back to AI, but like the AI black boxes that are being utilized by those vendors. And I think that this is a space that is going to become problematic, given that we have seen so many attacks on NPM. We have seen different vendors just, copy paste random things into their code just because they want to move fast. And it's going to create problems down the line once, somebody figures out how to exploit those gaps.
What do you, yeah, exactly. I mean, what are your thoughts on sort of software bill of materials? Is that a realistic concept? And, when are we going to be starting to ask our vendors to give us a detailed SBOM with their, as part of our arrangement with them?
Oh, excellent question. It is something that every company that gets asked for an SBOM, the immediate reaction is, nope, can't have that. That, you cannot look under the hood, just because, sadly, a lot of SaaS applications are built on so much old libraries and old crap that you just can't show that to anybody without having to do a dance and explain like why this red is not red and why, this critical CVE cannot be exploited. So I think we're getting to the point where the technology that we have can help us clean up that technical debt. But as earlier in the conversation, like the time to take the time needed to do that is not there. So I think that we're slowly getting to that point. And I think as we're moving away from open source scanning tools that are, internet ready, that really don't bring any value because they can't see what's under the hood, I think there's going to be a point where somebody starts asking for those SBOMs and then somebody else starts asking for them. And I think that we collectively have to push for that. But again, pushing for that is such a bottleneck for purchasing that when you do the whole song and dance around it, and I've seen this currently, I've seen it at other companies, it just makes the deal go so much slower that even the lawyers can like take a break from reading contracts because like the whole dance about getting the SBOM, analyzing it, takes so much time and energy, both to create it, unless you already, you're using something like Wiz, to, like using a third party, like figuring out an open source and trying to create the necessary narratives around it. Whereas I think that maybe a segment, and I'm sorry for going long here, a segment of this could be a part of penetration testing, that some of those analysis is done by the pen tester. So that way you have some part of like third party validation. So you do more of a gray box exercise where the SBOM is provided to the penetration testers so they can utilize that in their attack chains.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, if you think of the evolution, I mean, many years ago, people were asking for pen test results, right? Because they wanted to validate that, you had good perimeter access control and actions. And then now most people just ask, do you have a pen test, right? And they don't know, because people didn't want to give the pen test results. I mean, some people did, but it's probably the same thing with software, right? It's at some point, people are going to trust you, that you've got the right processes in place, and maybe just ask for, well, when did you last do analysis on it, or how did run a scan or a test on it and have a good process. But yeah, interesting kind of where we are in that process.
Right. To that point, if you had that data available, and you can look at all your vendors and say, okay, how many of my vendors are using this library in the tool that we have? Or maybe you do a risk base. How many of our, critical vendors? You don't have to do that whole exercise of sending an email to every single vendor and say, hey, are you using this library? Because we're freaking out because, there's a lot of FUD happening online regarding this vulnerability. And for the TPRM teams, for the heads of security to answer those and have an answer ready, knowing that you yourself can look in your own code and say, yep, we're safe, we're good here. Whereas before it took weeks to find an engineer who had to figure out how to look for that thing. And now we're more capable, but we're not pushing to unlock that capability and make it easier for others to be able to provide that information.
Is he? You mentioned Wiz earlier, and I'm just kind of curious on like the whole cloud posture and cloud security. I mean, I feel like a couple of years ago, you used to always hear about that cloud misconfiguration that like released all types of data and people found, and I feel like you don't hear that as much anymore. And maybe that's because like the news is just crazy with a lot of things, and now it gets buried. Have we gotten past that because there's a lot better tooling and like the hosting providers give you tooling? Is that changed? Is it still a big problem? I mean, given your role, what's your perspective on that?
Ooh, excellent question. So I would say there's two things happening, or maybe three. One, developers have more experience. They have been working in the cloud for, some for nearly 20 years, others for less than that, but there's more experience. So knowing what UI buttons to push, what configurations to change to make something secure by default is available. Like, everybody is in a better state of awareness what needs to be done, and not to for those best practices. Nobody's perfect, but there's some common things like, oh, I shouldn't put something in plain text, or I shouldn't, I should turn this feature off because reasons. There is that muscle is now fully functional. It can flex, and the developers are able to make those configurations make sense day one. The second part is the CSP tooling has gotten better. And even though there is a lot of things that are unlocked by paying for more services, there are things that are coming by default. It's locked down, and it's up to you to make those things, those security gaps open, because whatever reason, business need you have. So you're prevented of doing something stupid day one. I think that there is still a lot of folks that are non-technical that don't know what they're doing, and they're enabling themselves, but it's not from a bigger business. It's mostly like smaller businesses that are just I heard good things about S3 buckets, let me turn this on and figure it out. Oh, I have put in all my code in there, and it's in plain text and accessible on the internet. Whoopsie daisy, because they don't know better. So I think that there's still some gaps, but the gaps are more grouped towards smaller players rather than bigger businesses that are just going blind into the cloud world.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and I will say we've done some reviews of just basic rollout infrastructures, default infrastructures, say O365, and they've gotten much better just out of the box, right? Like that, it's just before they used to enable all the functionality, which would cause problems, and not so bad out of the box. So it's just been interesting. No, I appreciate the perspective. So we talked about all these emerging technologies. What ways do you stay sharp and on top of things? Conferences, podcasts. Like, how do you stay current with all this stuff?
I think it's a combination of spending some time, and I hate on LinkedIn, making sure to follow certain voices, staying up to date with certain newsletters, and signing up for all of them, every one of that you come across, and then fine tuning it to say like, this is too much noise, too many advertisements. This one isn't doesn't give me the information quick enough, and finding the ones that fit the needs of what you need yourself and what you need for your business. There are certain podcasts that are out there. There's a lot of them that are just a bunch of noise and speculation without the depth. And maybe that's, if you have a long ride, that's perfect. There's others that are more focused, that let the dust settle before they begin. So the podcast space is very noisy. And again, find something that works for you. And the last one is looking at Twitter. Cybersecurity, Twitter is still a thing. There's cybersecurity Mastodon, there's cybersecurity Blue Sky, but cybersecurity Twitter is still a thing. And there's a lot of good discussion that is happening there. Unfortunately, you have to spend time on that website, but it is what it is. And I think that's a good way of staying up to date. Creating the necessary connections as you grow personally and meet people in different conferences is also a good way to kind of use the network effect and stay in touch with those that you value, whose opinion you value. And I think that we don't do a very good job of maintaining those relationships. You make the connection, and then you ignore it until you meet the person 2 years later, right? But it's like, hey, I saw that you moved into healthcare. What's going on? What are some of your top priorities? And use that network to just become a little bit more chummy with the people and put yourself out there that you're curious, you're thinking about them, and grow that relationship. Because who knows, like, the cybersecurity community is small. I mean, we're talking about that we have an overlap of folks, and we just met. But it's a small world, and I think that together learning from each other is also a great way to stay current.
And you're in the Bay Area, right? So you're kind of very close to Silicon Valley and all of the startups that are going on there. How do you I guess there's a lot of noise going on, a lot of really interesting things going on. How do you kind of plug into that community particularly in the cybersecurity space?
There are several services that put together different startups that are seeking information. There are lots of VCs that have group meetings where they're, for lack of a better word, pushing some of the investments they have made in cybersecurity companies, and the network effect of those that I know locally. And with those powers combined, you can find something interesting. You might know somebody who's in stealth that doesn't have a public presence, but you can have an introduction and say, "Hey, what are you working on?" It might not be something that is important to you, but it unlocks a new connection and unlocks an understanding of a technology, and it, potentially opens the door to show to somebody else down the line that they're cooking something interesting. The other part is during conferences, especially with Black Hat and RSA, going into those spaces where the startups are hanging out and having the conversations, making the connections. You're going to be hanging out with a bunch of people that are much younger than yourself, but you have this ability to connect and see what they're thinking of, and how, with those of us that are seasoned, maybe we're looking at the world a little bit differently, and we have to, look at the younger folks to see how they see the world and how they see the challenges they're in, and come in with open ears and open eyes to understand how they're looking to solve those problems.
Yeah. Hey, so shifting gears a little bit, we just want to talk about leadership, and you've managed teams in the past and probably currently as well. Well, so so as a leader and someone that's grown up in the space, there's probably some things that have been modeled for you and told you've been told how to do things, but as well, there's probably things you'd had to figure out for yourself. Can you think of some examples where the path wasn't forged for you, but you really had to be creative and figure out how to solve certain problems?
I had a lot of different mentors and a lot of different folks that I worked under, whose management style I tried to replicate, and noticed that there are definitely faults in the way, the way that I took that approach. Nobody's perfect. There's no one way to do things. I think there's a lot of trial and error, and the best thing I try to do is to make sure that there's an open door policy to anybody who reports directly to me or part of my directs. So that way I don't feel like there's a wall that is preventing that feedback. And for my staff to also call me out on anything that they see myself messing up. Again, nobody's perfect, but if somebody doesn't speak up, you're going to be making that same mistake. And one of the best advice that I got is to find a mentor, somebody that I can trust outside of the organization, that I can vent and, talk about, not like a therapist, but just talk about problems, that is willing to listen and provide their advice, given their experience in this world. Since I see a lot of my peers that are stuck because they're, using a square peg in a round hole and hoping that it can go through, whereas they need to reflect, take a step back and look at, is this the best way that I can solve the problem? So, I've tried to emulate, I've tried to do my own thing, but at the end of the day, knowing that it has to be malleable, and saying, okay, this might work today, it might work tomorrow, but it's going to suck a lot in a year. So let's figure out how to make it suck less, or completely reimagine it, and get the input from your staff about how that is done. And at the same time, communicate that to management to say, like, hey, this is going to change. I'm figuring this out, and being transparent as much as possible to cover your butt, but also to explain that you're not going to jam your process because it's the best process ever. Because unfortunately, I don't think that I have written any management books, so I can't say that my management style is the best.
Yeah. Well, and I think the open door policy and getting inputs is very important. Like, I'll tell you, when we have, brainstorming sessions, or you brief on something and nobody has comments or feedback, you're like, guys, I'm not right all the time. So someone has an opinion here, please. Well, another one. How about on building teams and recruiting? Do you have any special advice or secret sauces to be recruiting talent and bringing people in? What do you look for, and how do you get the right people in the door?
So I know for myself that I like to become chummy, become friends with any new person that I meet, and it lowers my defense on some of the red flags that somebody else might see. Therefore, having a committee of folks that are going to be peers, that are going to be dotted lines, or that could be completely unrelated to the function hiring, having everybody come with a different perspective to the interviews, so that way my judgment of a person can be validated or supported by somebody else. So having somebody who's asking super technical questions, somebody that is being completely bureaucratic, suit and tie, stoic, rather than, t-shirt, let's hang out, let's be BFFs and, spend the interview talking about random things that are not important just because we're getting along well. I would say that out of all the people that I've hired, my gut feel has been good about 80% of the time, but I know that 20% of the time it didn't work out because I myself wasn't ready to have that conversation. Then I might not be the best interviewer. And having others to support me was essential to validate those claims. And the last thing I'll say here is that having also validation, like the post feedback, you might be like 100% for like one person, but giving the authority to somebody else to say like, I don't think I can work with him or her, coming from your staff goes a long way, because you might see all of the check marks across that person's resume and their skill set, but the other person there might be a clash of personality, and that's not going to solve itself anytime soon. So I know that a lot of managers just go with their gut feel, but I think that giving some of that responsibility to staff enables them to be more heard, and at the same time prevents any down the line problems that might arise.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important, and you can't have one person spoiling the culture and just like the team atmosphere. I mean, it's just not good. I think that's very, yeah. And then so looking at it, we talked earlier. You're working from your home office, so I'm assuming you work in at least a hybrid team, if not all remotely. So do you have any tips and tricks for, managing remote teams and communications and how you build, culture and a team bond in a remote working environment?
Definitely. So on the team right now, everybody is remote. My closest colleague is probably south of LA, and I'm in the Bay Area. And my manager is across the country, and we have staff globally. I think what's important is for ability to maintain culture and have that water cooler chat, and ability to just talk about random things and connect either through our communication tool or in person. And having those in-person experiences goes a long way, because there's this pent up want and need to meet somebody that you have spent so much time doing work and also connecting on your hobbies and things of that nature. And it goes a long way to see them and actually make that human connection. The other part is also, if you're remote, you're to go outside, touch grass, interact with other humans, so that you don't feel isolated. And I know for some people it can be depressing, especially those younger folks that are so used to having people around them all the time, and now they're working remotely, and they don't have any besties, besides their pet or significant other at home. So disconnecting for part of your day, going outside for a walk and kind of reconnecting with nature in some shape or form, or reconnecting with humanity by getting a lunch or a coffee, goes a long way to keep yourself sane. Because if you do this in and out and you're never interacting with anybody, you're completely introverted, you're not going to have a good time, and you're going to lose a lot of the social cues that you're going to need when you meet somebody in person during one of those offsites.
Awesome. I think that's the reality of the environment we're in now. So some good tips here. So, Z, how do you translate and communicate technical risk factors to senior leadership, maybe to the board? Be interested in any experience you've got there, and what if you've had any success in making sure that they act on those technical issues?
So I think there are two things. One, translating technical risks into actual business risks and quantifying them and normalizing that data in some shape or form to give them a range of what the impact would be, either by not doing it, doing something about it now, later, and doing the research to know what that looks like from a financial perspective goes a long way, because you're speaking in business terms, not technical terms. The other part is to find good analogies to help you solve that gap, because sometimes a part of the board or part of the C-suite, you have individuals that are not super technical. They could care less about security. You'll lose them once you start nerding out about technology and putting it in terms that they understand, and knowing who your confidants are and finding easy wins for those that are adjacent to. So you might have the CTO's attention, but you have lost, head of legal or the CMO, and helping them understand what the risk is and putting it in their sense. Like the legal risk is there. The ability to market is going to be, it's going to take away time here, and putting yourself in their shoes of what they would like to, what would make sense for them to hear in order to understand what you're aiming for. I had a lot of meetings where I was adamant about many years ago that GDPR is going to be a biggie and we're not prepared for it. Nobody's prepared, but we need some investment to figure it out. And everybody's saying like, what the hell, what are you going on about? Like, nobody cares about privacy. And this was in a healthcare space. So privacy would have been my concern, but I didn't do a good job of putting myself in the shoes of others in that meeting to help them understand what the impact would be across their functions. So I think that just like anything else, put yourself in other person's shoes and try to understand how you can speak to them, rather than going with your narrative that is very narrow in its point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So as you sort of sit here and look out, say, over the next 5 years, would you like to offer a bold prediction about where cybersecurity is going?
I think there is a lot of incentives for everybody to use the AI capabilities to get things done themselves, create agents, create workflows, use different skills to be more effective, efficient. Hey, can you do this instead of hiring 5 people? I think there's going to be a bit of a reversal effect, because we're going to go in deep and we're going to get into problematic areas where we're, taking slop and putting in production, taking analysis done by AI that are fabricated and putting it in front of people that are going to make decisions on it that are going to be incorrect due to the data being not incorrect itself. So I think there's going to be a course correction where we are going to be looking for people that know how to use AI rather than replacing people with AI. And I think it grows across the board that you might think that, oh, I can replace this whole function with AI. But at the end of the day, you're going to have one person who is going to be, the steam is going to be coming out of their ears because they're trying to do the work of multiple people with something that is not perfect, such as AI. At the same time, AI is going to get better. It's going to get less expensive given the infrastructure investment, consolidation of vendors. So we're going to see some really great gains there. But I think at the end of the day, there are certain functions that are not going to be replaceable. And we're going to go back on what we're promised as the dream AI state is now to something that is more analogous to what we have had like 3 years ago, but with more of a umph. And last thing I would say, AI will also unlock new industries that we are not aware that we're missing, or that we haven't had a good way to figure out how to solve those problems. And there's going to be lots of cool, interesting entrants in that technology space.
Cool. That's awesome. That's like 3 predictions there. That's awesome.
I think that's a good prediction. I agree with you.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm excited. I think that given all of the different technologies that we have seen come and go, this one seems to be sticking around for more, for longer, and it doesn't feel like the previous boom with cryptocurrency, blockchain, NFTs, and all of that space. There's a lot of people that were jazzed, but to this day we still haven't figured out what to use Bitcoin for. So I feel like there's tangible value that is now unlocked, and I think that everybody's more hyped and excited, and we don't have degrees in, just like we didn't have degrees in cybersecurity 10 years ago, we don't have degrees in AI. And I'm sure that, there's a whole generation that is going to be like AI native with the way that they approach their work itself. So it's completely exciting.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I agree with you, and I think the speed, people are probably over exaggerating the speed of change. I think things are going to take, certain places, certain industries, certain jobs will probably more than others. But I mean, to get wide scale transformation in job roles is going to take some time, right? Maybe decades. And
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Z. So we spent some time in the fire right now, and we want to step back from the pit and learn about who's behind the tongs. That's a transition for we want to learn more about you. So take us back to the beginning. So did you always think, little Z, when you were in kindergarten, that you were going to be a cybersecurity professional? So what's your origin story? Like, what was the thing that got you into it? Like, what was your journey? How'd you get into cybersecurity?
Yeah. So when I was a little wee lad, I was very into tech. I grew up in what was then Yugoslavia. I remember when my dad brought his computer home for the first time, I was so excited. Everything was in English. I didn't read any English. I had older kids come over and translate for me so we can, get through Prince Persia or Carmen Sandiego. But technology was always like something that I was very excited about. And when I came to the States as a refugee, we didn't have jack squat, but like my dad was able to get a computer from the classify ads, and I spent all my free time that I could on that computer and then on the internet. Technology was essentially always a part of my life, but I didn't think much of security until I entered at KPMG. There's a cybersecurity function, and one of the folks that was on the same engagement that I was on said, like, hey, you should, like, you seem like you're well aligned to this. You should take a look at this. When I went to business school, I was thinking of something, like project management, product management. But then KPMG just opened my eyes to what's possible, what the assessments look like, how much penetration tests are, how much fun there is to hack, and how you can get paid to just basically break into things. So that led me on journey, starting consulting at KPMG, going into finance in risk, and I'm really grateful for the doors that those folks opened for me, and they saw my eagerness to learn as a way to get me in and help them out.
Is there anything you do different looking back at your career and your path?
I would have spent a whole lot more time learning how to program better. It is definitely something that has I don't want to say limit me, but like it took me a while to understand, especially coming to Bay Area, going from an old school company where it's servers and OSs that are like on that have been ignored by the vendor for like X many years, but critical infrastructure runs on them, and then going into the cloud and not like, what the heck is AWS? I asked myself when I first moved to the Bay Area, and not having a good way to transition from racks to cloud, and learning everything from scratch, and then having an imposter syndrome follow me around at every company that I've been at, and learning along and saying like, okay, I need to stop and figure this out, because I am not going to be effective in my job unless I figure out how this technology works, and finding the right resources to do that, and going back to programming and understanding how things are done the modern way. In school, we were taught, like waterfall is the best way. And coming to Bay Area, there's this thing called GitHub, and everybody celebrates snow days when GitHub goes down, and things of that, like that.
All right. So we also like to pretend, and we're hoping that we get some early professionals on here, or kids just coming out of college. So if you got some advice for them, people up and coming, what's your advice for the young ones coming up in the industry?
Ooh, I would say that make the biggest network that you can, be bold, and just go out there and connect as to many as people as possible, not blindly, but like find somebody who's doing something interesting that aligns to your needs. You have some commonality, same alum, same geography, what have you, and make those connections, because everything in this space is going to be relationship based. If it wasn't for existing relationships, I wouldn't have had the career path I've had. And it goes a long way to push yourself out there, say, hey, I'm a new grad in this space. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for advice, about X and Y. And finding, statistically, if you send out 100 invites, you'll have somebody that responds and can give you value. So you just got to put yourself out there and make some noise.
I think the networking one is one that we get very frequently, and I think it's good. I think people don't realize that you gotta build it before you need it. It's really good.
Right. Because that person that you send the request, somebody might accept your request. You might not have many interactions with them, but 5 years later, they might be in the same industry, same employer that you're looking to. And now you have a door in. Somebody might be able to refer you or use the network effect to put you in front of somebody that you don't know. I think it goes a long way of looking out for each other. And I think as leaders, for us to be open to that, if some random person who's a newly graduate asks to connect and they have a good pitch, hear them out. It doesn't hurt. It at the end of the day, you waste 15 minutes of your life, but you might make more than 15 minutes worth of somebody else's time.
Well, and I think also if you're doing it generally just because you want advice and you want to meet someone before you actually need something, and people in the community are willing to help. It's a very helpful community. So yes, I do. I think great advice.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we can't let you leave the show without talking about the smokehouse. So that means different things to different people. So let's start off and ask, are you an indoor and outdoor cook?
Mostly indoor. However, I know that the podcast is smokehouse based. I am plant based, so I think I'll have to just talk about how I prepare my tofu.
Yeah, go ahead. So is that your what's your favorite plant based food? Is it tofu or?
No. I mean, there's going to China and having my eyes open how many different ways somebody can prepare tofu, and eating nothing but tofu for about 2 weeks has definitely left me with more questions than answers about am I eating tofu wrong? But right now I would say that Beyond Meat patties are like my favorite. My kid loves them. And I haven't eaten meat since the 90s. So from my understanding, it's a great replacement. However, having a good burger experience and doing that whole American Dad thing where you're in front of the grill drinking a beer, your kid is playing, and it kind of follows that trope very nicely. And I'm glad I can replicate that.
That's cool. Awesome.
So Z, I did know this coming here, so I did do a quick search before we got on here. So I do a lot of Traeger recipes. There is a tofu Traeger recipe, a couple of them, so they do not exclude. So that is on there. And I thought I would at least pipe up, my non, my plant-based go-to. We usually do these, salt crusted baked potatoes. Does that count? Will you do those?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing on the Traeger. You just kind of oil up a baked potato or a potato before it's baked, lots of salt, and you put them in there, 500 degrees for like an hour. It's like my go-to with the family. So
for an hour. Wow.
And they're nice and crispy. They taste amazing. So that's my non-meat on the Traeger for you.
So one thing on the grill though, that I would suggest, if you get an avocado, slice it in half, remove the pit, put any spice on top of it, keep it as is, and just leave it on the grill itself. The spices kind of marinate inside the avocado itself, and it tastes so amazing. And you just eat it with a spoon because it gets so soft. So you're not even slicing it and putting it on whatever. You're just kind of, just like a potato, you're kind of taking a half and eating out of the skin.
That's so funny. I was talking to someone this morning about fried avocado. I don't know if you've ever tried that. That is really good. Yeah. So there's a restaurant up here in Georgia that does it, and it's like, the first time I come across it, it's so good because it's got that crispy kind of outside, and then you bite in and it's nice soft avocado, and it's slightly warm, and it's really nice.
Oh, that sounds delicious. Okay, it's lunchtime here, so now I'm getting super super hungry. Awesome.
People want to get in touch with you. Is there any way? Are you on LinkedIn or got a website or anything like that?
I used to have a website. Now it just points to my LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my de facto way of communicating my frustrations and my shit posting on the state of things. So if you want some humor, follow me on LinkedIn. But that's where I'll be.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it. Well, Z, it's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you for bringing honesty and your experience to the Smokehouse today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
And to everybody listening, if you got something out of today's conversation, if it made you think or made you laugh, please tell someone about it. That's how we grow the community. Subscribe to wherever you get podcasts, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Cyber Smokehouse. And that wraps another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at cybersmokehouse.com. Cyber Smokehouse is sponsored by TBD Cyber, a cybersecurity strategy consulting firm.
TBD Cyber works with organizations to assess their security program, develop and implement security initiatives, and optimize their security investments. We work in areas as broad as data security, risk management, cyber resilience, and security architecture. Our clients value us for our extensive expertise and independent advice, which is why we do not sell security products or deliver managed security services. If you want to work with a trusted advisor, we can help. You can learn more at tbdcyber.com. We'll see you on the next one.